Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble. Fire burn the people bubble. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sajid and I am a witch. Ooh, girl, get back in there. Get back. Anybody have a bobby pin? You know what? Let's just... Yeah. Are you looking for horror? Are you looking for gore? Are you looking for something that will keep you up at night? Well, honey, you came to the wrong place because I can't read that kind of shit. That's the purpose of this video, actually. I wanted to recommend some books that I think are perfect for spooky season, that are a little bit paranormal or fantastical, that have a dark and maybe macabre edge to them, that are scary in some ways, but that are not necessarily like, you know, horror. So these are books that are perfect for people who want that spooky, gloomy vibe, but who don't necessarily want to be scared, if you get the gist. This, by the way, this is my bat. His name is Batty.
Oh, what you said? Queen.
The first few books I have to recommend are actually young adult novels, and I'll start off with the Diviner series by Libba Bray. This is a paranormal fantasy series set in 1920s New York, and we are following these teenagers, all of whom have special powers and abilities. An evil reawakens in the world, and people in New York City begin dying in the most gruesome and horrid ways. And our main character, Evie O'Neill, one of the Diviners, that's one of the teenagers who has these magical powers, it's up to her and her uncle and some of her friends to try and figure out what is going on. But she may just end up finding herself in the belly of the beast. This is such a brilliant historical fiction series that brings to life 1920s New York with the speakeasies and the music and the flappers and the dancing and the really short haircuts. It also delves into a lot of what is wrong with American society. All of the teenagers in this story come from marginalized backgrounds, and the demonic entities in many ways sort of stand in for the people in American society who have always been at the top of the totem pole. The book delves a lot into misogyny and patriarchy, into racism and anti-immigration, into anti-Semitism, as well as ableism. It's such a fantastic and interesting story, and it doesn't feel like it's trying to spoon-feed those issues or those topics down your throat, but rather it's using horror and this sort of paranormal evil force to represent the ways in which American society and the American dream is not designed for everybody and is in many ways detrimental to a lot of the people who exist within the system. It is, oh my god, such a beautiful series. Like, I can't even do this series justice in the way that I talk about these books. I feel like I need to finish the series and do like a really good deep dive. If that's something you're interested in, please let me know. I should not have gotten this cheap ass thing. I should have gone to Halloween Town and scalp a troll or something. Get some real authentic... Oh, this is going to be all over my room now. Oh god. I'm gonna try to put back the orange streak in my hair because honestly, I feel like it gives, you know? Do I look good? Do I look pretty? Then, well, this is an actual ghost story. This is called The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. In this book, we're following our main character, who is a Native American woman, and she is working in a bookstore that specializes in selling... I love how I'm just like flipping my... So stupid. It's a bookstore that specializes in selling native... This is so uncomfortable. It is a bookstore that specializes in selling Native American literature, and our main protagonist works in the bookstore, and one of their regular customers is a white woman who seems to have a bit of a fetish, for lack of a better way of putting it, for Native American culture. And so she's always coming into the bookstore and buying everything and reading everything and all that kind of stuff. And one day she comes and she takes a book that is very strange and different from the rest of the books in this story. And while reading... Did I swallow it here? While reading this special paranormal book, this white woman, I forgot her name. Yeah, her name is Flora, so she died. And then her ghost starts to haunt the bookstore. Again, not a very scary read. It's almost a little on the nose, a little satirical in many ways, but also such a beautiful exploration of Native American culture and history and literature. And it ends up delving into so much more than that, because a lot of this book actually ends up taking place in 2020 when COVID hit. And so it was one of the first stories, and probably one of the only stories thus far that I've read, that actually takes place like in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ways in which it affected the main characters and their lives. Let me see, this angle is really not... Okay. Is that better? Are you still seeing Batty? Batty is important for this video, okay? Wow, I look, wow. Ridiculous. Oh my god. What would I look like with long hair? Comment down below. Do you want to see me with long hair? Oof. Microplastics. That's the scary thing here. Honey, that's the thing that we should be concerned about. Not no ghouls and monsters and ghosts. Microplastics, honey. Microplastics. Okay, yeah, so we have Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. This is a collection of very macabre and weird, sort of like speculative short stories that delve into some of the more disturbing aspects of the human condition. That's as much as I could say about it without really getting into details of each of the stories. It's fascinating. I find that it did not stick with me. Like, I don't really, like, think about this book a lot. It's one of those books that I've read that I often forgot that I've read. But I think it would be a perfect read for this time of year. As I said, the stories are disturbing and macabre to some extent. And they're really all, you know, sort of just trying to explore aspects of the human condition in ways that we don't really think about. If I could, like, recall one story that stood out to me the most, it was a story where food is no longer needed and people can no longer eat. So, like, if you try to eat or consume food, it'll just not work out. So there was this character who had this sort of, like, underground business where she was bringing people in, and I can't remember what she was doing, but she was trying to like simulate eating for them so that they can experience the pleasure of eating, the pleasure that we get from consuming food without actually doing it. It was so bizarre and strange and just something that I never thought about, and it makes you think about eating in this different way. This is a really interesting exploration of like pleasure and the lengths that we will go to feel certain types of pleasure. That's one story in this book. All of the stories in this book are just really weird. You should read it. Another short story collection that was really macabre and honestly kind of scary was Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez, which was translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. So this is a collection of short stories that are all taking place in 1990s Argentina, and they're all basically horror, though I personally didn't find them that scary, and I'm easily scared. There were one or two stories in here that did creep me out a little bit, I'm not going to lie, but for the most part it's not very scary, and I think if you can't stomach horror, this should still be a fine book for you, but proceed with caution, obviously. In many ways, like, all of the horrific and macabre and paranormal elements of each of the stories are meant to kind of mirror and allegorize what was happening to people in Argentina in the 1990s. The political situation, which to be quite honest, I don't remember much about. I did look into it a little bit more when I read this book like 4 years ago. But basically because of what was happening in Argentina at the time, people suffered in many ways. So this book is kind of like a thought experiment. What if you take that suffering and you explore it in the context of horror? You know, what if you turn abuse and addiction and people going missing and all that kind of stuff, into a boogeyman? What would that look like? And it was a really interesting exploration of that. And as much as I don't like horror, these types of books really kind of remind me why horror is important and the purpose it serves as a storytelling device. Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi, which was translated from Arabic by Jonathan Wright. This is a book that takes place in Baghdad, and it sort of starts off where this guy, creepy weird guy, is just going around Baghdad collecting body parts because of all of the violence that is happening in Iraq at the time. He goes around collecting body parts of people who died by violence and explosions and stuff like that, and he stitches the body parts together into one human form as a sort of like protest or demonstration for the government. I can't remember why he was doing it. And that thing comes alive, and just like this here, it comes alive and it begins to kill people, but not just any people. It goes around and it's killing the people who were responsible for the deaths of the people that its body is made up of, if that makes sense. So it's trying to bring justice to the people that died, at the hands of this violence or whatever. Every time it kills one of the people that's responsible for killing the people that it's made up of, a body part begins to rot and fall off. And so the Frankenstein thing in this book, which I think is just called The Thing, they were calling it something like that, he becomes very concerned about this naturally, because when all of the body parts begin to rotten off of him, he will no longer exist. So what he does is he goes around killing more people to take their body parts, and soon he's made up of the body parts of innocent people that he killed. So it's kind of like this interesting sort of metaphor or allegory. I keep using allegory in this video. I guess maybe that's what horror and paranormal is. It's like allegories and stuff, but it's kind of functioning as an allegory for, you know, you have people whose causes, you know, who fight and seek justice in ways that are sometimes violent for valid and justifiable reasons, but then as they continue to do that, what happens over time is that they can easily become corrupted and just become another version of the thing that they were trying to defeat in the first place. I also have Daylight Come by Diana Macaulay. This book takes place in a futuristic Jamaica in the 2080s or whatever, wherein climate change has basically screwed over the planet. Our main protagonist is trying to flee the coastal areas of Jamaica, which are becoming flooded because of the rising sea levels, and they're trying to run away into the mountains of Jamaica, which are a little bit cooler and which, you know, don't have the problem of flooding, but only rich and upper class people are able to do that. So she and her mother kind of have to sneak away under the radar to try and find safety in the mountains of Jamaica. Unlike all the other books on this list, this is not a paranormal book. It's more of a dystopian story, but it also is very scary because it's climate fiction and it's a story that explores what could possibly happen if we don't act fast. And what I love about that is that it explores it in a Caribbean context. A lot of the times, you know, when you read like, you know, popular dystopian and climate fiction novels, like it's always centered in the global north. So it's just really, really fascinating to see something like that centered in the global south. I really need to read more climate fiction because if we want to talk about real horror and real scary shit, climate change is what we should be talking about. The last couple of books I have to mention before my battery dies, unless it already died. Let me see, y'all still here? Hello, yes? Okay, y'all still here. The last few books that I have to recommend are non-fiction books, and they're all by Caitlin Doughty. So I have 3 of her books. Well, one of them I lent out, so I just have 2 of them right here. The first is her memoir. It is called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, just like this synthetic wig, and other lessons from the crematorium, depending on where you're from. And this is a memoir of her time working in a crematorium in San Francisco, I believe. I really love this memoir, and I really loved how much we learn from Caitlin about the death industry in this book. You may be familiar with her channel, Ask a Mortician. A lot of what she talks about on her channel when it comes to things like, you know, the death industry and, you know, the exploitation of the average American. I can't. This is so, like, I'm earnestly just flipping my hair. Oh my god. I really need to grow my hair out. Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of, like, you know, critique of the death and dying industry, as well as a very interesting exploration of what, you know, working in death and dying looks like. Her second book, which is my favorite, is called From Here to Eternity, Traveling the World to Find the Good Death. And this one is also kind of a memoir, but it's a lot less personal, and it's more of a travel memoir. She's going to different parts of the world, like Indonesia, Mexico, different parts of the US as well. Can't remember where else she went, but it's such a fascinating book because it is exploring the different types of death rituals and practices that, you know, other people in other cultures observe, and how to us it may seem very weird and macabre, some of the things that people are doing, but in many ways this is just how different people have, you know, dealt with death and grief and helping people pass on for centuries. It in many ways sort of serves the purpose of, I guess, decentering, you know, Western ideas of what death should look like and how we should think about death and how we should approach death and grieving. Fascinating book. The last book of hers that I have to recommend is called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And this is basically a trivia book. It is much less personal than these two. It's not really a memoir. It is more like very short chapters where Caitlin is answering some of the most bizarre questions that were asked to her by children, because children ask really weird questions, and she's sort of answering questions like, will my cat eat my eyeballs? Can we bury grandma in the backyard? So it's just a really interesting kind of like trivia book again. It's to me it wasn't as substantive as her other 2 books, but it's still a really good read for October. I'm gonna end this video now because my phone camera is about to die. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've made it to the end of this video, please subscribe and like this video, leave a comment.